US President Donald Trump is attending the World Economic Forum in Davos and is bringing the Greenland controversy with him. The biggest island in the world has now become a flashpoint, threatening to tear the largest transatlantic alliance apart. Just a day before his arrival, Trump mocked European leaders. He leaked chats with his French counterpart, saying that Emmanuel Macron would soon be out of office.
No, I wouldn't do that. No. Because, you know, Emmanuel's not going to be there very long. And, you know, there's no longevity there. He's a friend of mine. He's a nice guy. I like Macron. But he's not going to be there very much longer, as you know. And I think, you know, I have meetings with the people that are directly involved, not some of the people you're talking about.
Well, Trump has turned Davos into a stage for what looks like a self-made geopolitical drama. And when asked how far he would go to acquire Greenland, his answer was chillingly simple: you'll find out. Even as he left the White House, Trump admitted he had no idea how the Davos trip would pan out. That uncertainty followed him to the runway, where a minor electrical issue forced Air Force One to turn back mid-flight. But his trip soon resumed. Well, this is Trump's first Davos address in 6 years. Initially, it was supposed to be about affordability, housing costs and domestic priorities. That plan now seems to be off the table. In fact, while speaking of Europe, Trump said, and I quote, "Europe is not heading in the right direction," then justifying levies. He said tariffs have slashed trade deficit and that the American exports are going up. Well, this comes as Trump has threatened tariffs on European countries that oppose his bid to buy or seize Greenland. He says he will hold meetings on Greenland in Davos and is expected to meet NATO Chief Mark Rutte on the sidelines of the summit. Trump is also predicting a deal that is very good for everybody. NATO, he claims, will be very happy. And he says Greenlanders who have protested American annexation will be thrilled. But Europe is not convinced, with EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen saying the bloc must move faster to boost its economy and defence power. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has also drawn a line in the snow.
We do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality. You're welcome in Europe, and you are more than welcome to France.
The US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent hit back at these comments. He called Europeans bitter and said they should avoid reflexive anger. Meanwhile, Canada's Mark Carney said the old world order is gone, that this is not a transition, it's a rupture. And then came the most striking description of all, from California Governor Gavin Newsom. He says Trump is a kind of dinosaur.
This is diplomacy with Donald Trump. He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
And you're
people need to stand, but no, the Europeans could be if they continue down this path and process. They need to stand tall, stand firm, stand united. Look, a year ago we should have been having this conversation, and they didn't. Okay, and now you're paying the price. Exactly what anyone objective observer would have anticipated we'd be where we are today.
Strong words, but they reflect real anxiety. Trump is only 1 year into his second term, and his extraordinary assertion of American power has made Greenland the backdrop of Davos. Protests erupted in several Swiss cities ahead of Trump's visit, and European leaders plan to use the summit to call out what they see as a new colonialism. For now, though, the immediate goal is simple: stop the tariffs, cool the rhetoric, and divert the president from his push for complete and total control of Greenland. Davos is widely described as a meeting of minds. This year, though, it looks more like a test of resolve. When it comes to Trump, leaders are not just listening to a speech, they're watching for a signal of where America is headed and how much the rest of the world is willing to push back. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Christina Spohr, who is a professor of international history at the London School of Economics, joining us live from the UK capital. Welcome to the programme. In your view, then, just how serious is this Greenland issue, as neither side seems willing to back down in any way, even as Trump gives his speech?
I think it's a very important backdrop to the whole imbroglio we are in, because it is through Greenland that the whole rhetoric got ramped up, that Trump has used to really demonstrate his power, that he has engaged in this bullying towards the European allies, and that he has taken this sort of Western hemispheric perspective in the aftermath of the Venezuela intervention. In fact, we have to bear in mind that, of course, NATO, the North Atlantic organization, is precisely, of course, what he's after if he really is interested in strategic strengths in that sphere vis-à-vis Russia and China. And at the same time, what has been completely forgotten, of course, in the background is a war that's already rumbling on, namely the war of conquest by Russia in Ukraine. So in some ways, Greenland is the latest flashpoint because it also has brought out Trump as a tariff king. And of course, we now have to ask ourselves, is he going to be Taco Trump, or is he really going to try and bully this through? And that is where we have to expect and really hope, and I think it is the duty of the European leaders to push back hard against this method of driving power from the top, from the United States, really engaging in raw power and economic blackmail, which is really unheard of. And we can really see that, as Cary said yesterday, the leader of Canada, that the world order is at a point of rupture.
Davos is all about personal meetings, isn't it? And diplomacy often works better in person. Could that make a difference, given that Donald Trump is actually there?
I actually do think that we both have to now see what is happening in the speech, and then what the discussions yield, both in the margins and the bilaterals that have been scheduled. Absolutely. I believe that we are now looking at a meeting where we have face-to-face encounters, and we are moving out of this time when we had a lot of diplomatic signaling through social, through these various photographs that were released yesterday, more or less real, as we know, this sort of AI-made picture with leaders in the room in the White House, and that map of Canada, America, Venezuela, and Greenland, all under the American flag. It's very, very important to meet face to face, because it's only then that really people sort of get a sense of the other side. And since we are in this complete unpredictability, since Trump completely plays this sort of trying to leave everybody in the dark, and in any case, we're not entirely sure whether he has a strategy or whether he acts on impulse. Today, I think, is a very important day, and we have to see tomorrow where we have gotten after both the sort of public display of power and the rant we are already hearing, the speech that started about 15 minutes ago, and what will be coming out of subsequent meetings and panels.
Europe is certainly taking this seriously. Just how worried should NATO be as an organization?
I think all the organizations, as we know them, that are part of our international legal order, that are part of our order of creating the predictability and of creating fora where we have regular meetings and can discuss, it's very in danger that NATO can be torn apart from within itself, because its strongest ally, the United States, is playing bully boy. This pertains, of course, to the United Nations. Yesterday, we also heard about this sort of Council of Peace, all these sort of new parallel kind of institutions. They're not really institutions, they're sort of clubs being established. Institutions are there that create predictability and stability. This is where national interests can be expressed. This is where compromises can be found. And this is also where small and medium powers have equal say as equal members. And we will have a real problem internationally and drift into a sort of 19th century power politics when only the big powers decide, or when money decides, when countries can be bought, sovereignty is worth nothing, the tool of war is being applied. I think it's a very dangerous drift into this kind of world where the strongest will want to rule, because everything we have known and what we learned from World War I and World War II was to hopefully move into a better world where we would have a better engagement between powers of different strengths. And simply, in Europe, we are looking at small powers and middle powers, as well as then the big powers that have been playing, the tectonic shifts in the world.
Now, we've just heard that Donald Trump is saying that, quote, only the US can secure Greenland, and he was talking about World War II as well. Does he have a point there?
No, actually, I do not think so, because the United States is a member of NATO. The whole idea derives indeed out of World War II, when, after the Nazis had annexed and occupied Denmark, and then also put up weather stations in Greenland. The idea of Roosevelt was that if we don't want the Nazis in the United States, we need to have a sort of quasi-bastion ahead. And so we need to build airfields and bases in Greenland and Iceland, incidentally. And so this was, of course, the beginning, which then, as we move forward into the Cold War, that is what is the Western Hemisphere. That is the North Atlantic Organization. The United States is part of it. If we are concerned about the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, for example, if we are concerned of that North Atlantic part of the Arctic as we look to the north, if we are worried about Russian incursions, be it, with regards to our cable infrastructure, in other words, what's happening on the seabed, or as regards to submarine activity, then NATO is already the organization that is there, of which the United States is part, and we need to act together to, in a common way, work towards shoring up that particular part of the world. It is so ironic that Trump has made Greenland his hobby horse, when really he should be looking to Alaska and looking across the Bering Strait to Russia there, and to the Sino-Russian military activity and naval cooperation that is taking place in those waters on the other side of the United States. And there too, of course, if you take the polar perspective, we can think about 7 NATO countries being part of the 8 Arctic countries, leaving Russia out, are actually there to secure it. So why not work with the allies? Why just try to sort of play your big bullying power boy game? That is really all about his ego. And on top of it, it is about his interest in the raw materials that he knows lie in Greenland. That's what really made it interesting for him in the first place, not the question whether longer term we have to worry about Russian or Chinese actions around the Greenlandic waters.
Indeed. I mean, what will Russia and China been making of this, and what Trump has been saying over Greenland? What will their stance be now?
Well, we heard from Lavrov yesterday. I mean, the Russians are having a field day. First of all, they banged on about how Denmark didn't really have much right to Greenland, actually applying what Trump had said, because, that was all colonial. Well, of course, if you think about that colonial past for Greenland, as regards to Denmark's missionaries or Danish-Norwegian missionaries who went there in the first place, or even earlier when the Vikings had arrived and the Thule Inuit arrived around the same time on that big island, then we need to make the comparison and think about how did Russia actually become a Eurasian empire? Precisely by the sort of appropriation through their sable hunters in Siberia. I mean, Russia is actually the real colonial power here, so they can't really talk to Denmark, but they are loving it. That, of course, the whole world is now focused on the Greenland issue, that the NATO is tearing itself apart over this, that the United States has thrown this down. And, of course, meanwhile, Putin has a free hand in Ukraine, because the whole world is looking somewhere else. And we heard, of course, that into this little spiel that's going on today, we have Davos, but the Russians are going to see Witkoff tomorrow in the Kremlin. So one thing is happening after another. And all these timings, of course, do matter and are nicely being played out. So that's why I do think it's absolutely imperative that the Western leaders, the NATO members of Europe, really stand united and push back hard and refuse all that's coming from the White House on this. I mean, the Chinese can just sit on the margins, because the Chinese can tell themselves, well, if everybody is banging on about Greenland and Trump wants Greenland for himself, then why can't we have Taiwan and play a bit of sea blockade or something? In fact, Trump is providing China with the best playbook for that.
Okay. We are, forgive me, I'm going to have to jump in there. We are out of time. But Christina Spohr, thank you very much indeed for your insights here on First Post America. Thank you.
Thank you.
The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from internet outrage to real-world injustice. The conversations everyone is having and the ones they're avoiding. It's the same show, but this new year, First Post America gets a new look. I'm Cary Johnston, and this is First Post America.